Okay, Lee, I think we should start up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just glide through the slides and touch base on the main parts of the book. And oh, we have somebody coming in from California right now. Very nice. Welcome, CK. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Dr. Barbara Ella Milton Jr. And people call me Dr. B or Barb. I'm not hung up on all of that. I am, oh, excuse me a second. I am rather hung up on the junior part, however, because it is my claim to my mother and my connection to my mom. So, which you'll learn about here in the presentation. I do want to recognize that Lee Penna is here. Lee Penna is the community liaison for the Secaucus Public Library. Welcome, Lee, and thank you so much for extending me this opportunity to discuss my mother's book with folks from our community here. I also have my aunt joining me now. This is my aunt Yvonne. She's now the matriarch of the family. And so very good to see you all here. Lee, did you want to say anything at all before I get started?
No, I just wanted to thank you for giving us this opportunity to hear your story and to hopefully give some guidance to caregivers that are going to be going through some of the hurdles that you've had to go through. And I just appreciate you sharing your story with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hello, Auntie. Very good to see you. Auntie, you're going to need to mute your microphone. Okay. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm going to start a PowerPoint right now. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Perfect. So the name of the book that I wrote about my mother is called Heeding the Caregiver Call, the story of Barbara Ella Milton Sr. and Alzheimer's disease. And I can hear you, your Auntie.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Welcome. Great to see you.
Good to be here.
This is the matriarch of my family.
Yeah, I was trying to find out how to do this.
Well, you did it. Thank you so much. Do you know how to mute?
Yeah, I see mute right here.
All right, so you're going to have to mute. And what I'm going to do is talk about the book. Then I'm going to open it up for questions and comments. Okay.
All right.
And don't blush too much when I mention your name.
Please.
All right. And Nessa, Auntie, you're going to have to mute as well. Okay, she's now doing that. Okay. So this is the book, Heeding the Caregiver Call. And I want to read the back jacket for you. This is the little synopsis that I wrote about the book. It says, in the fall of 2015, Barbara Sr. called her only child to ask her for help. Unbeknownst to her family, Barbara Sr. was already in the grips of Alzheimer's. This book tells the story of Barbara Jr.'s journey as her mother's caregiver and shares insights into the physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual impacts of caregiving while fighting her own cancer. It also provides practical information to others who assume caregiving roles for their loved ones. Follow this mother and daughter's journey through resentments and regrets, forgiveness and faith, laughter and love. Barbara Jr. promised her mother on her deathbed that she would tell her story. Here it is. So here are the elements of the book. You're going to learn a lot about my mother, her early life, through the course of her illness and through her passing away. You're going to read about the unfolding of Alzheimer's disease, what it looks like up close and personal. You're going to see the way a symphony of support has been built by myself and our family, which is the only way you're going to get through caring for your loved one with Alzheimer's. And I call it a symphony because in some ways I was like an orchestra, a conductor. And I was orchestrating and maneuvering and manipulating this vast array of services, resources, and personnel that was needed to provide the care and to make sure mommy was safe. Part of the book is about making peace with the past, and you're going to hear about the redemptive power of love and forgiveness. You're going to see an accumulation of caregiving tips through lived experience. So you're going to be able to see them as they unfold and manifest. There's an element around care, balancing self-care, my cancer care, and my mother's care. And then an element around sort of a spiritual trajectory throughout the book, moving towards a state of gratitude and radical acceptance. Why did I write the book? My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2015 in the fall. We went searching for lots of information on the internet. We looked at websites, YouTube videos, articles. We looked for agencies. We searched for books on the topics. And almost all the people featured in the material that we found were not people of color. And it surely is not because it doesn't happen to people of color. This was my mother's first question to me. She said, if this is happening to her, how could this be so if it seemed like only Caucasians got Alzheimer's? And I said to her very emphatically, Mommy, no, 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 no. This is a disease. It doesn't discriminate. Everybody gets it. Black, white, Latino, rich, poor, middle class, upper class, lesbian, straight, all religions. And I said, but you know, our stories aren't there. And I was alarmed about that. And she said, well, we need to tell people that Black people get Alzheimer's too. And it was in that moment that my mom said to me, you know, can you write a book about this? And I said, sure, that's a great idea. We'll write the book. And so it was at that moment that I decided that I would start with recording things my mom was doing, visits to doctors, sort of interviewing her loosely, to use that word, about how that was for her, keeping good notes, keeping a list of all the people we were interfacing with, every stage, interviewing people that were working for us, talking to agency heads, talking to the people in the nursing homes when we went to that route and moved mommy into long-term care. So all of that began. And then of course with Facebook and things like that, I was recording Facebook postings pretty regularly. So in the book, you're going to get, you'll read a number of Facebook postings. I used to do an ongoing series called The Alzheimer's Diary. And it was a way to capture things in real time that I was experiencing. Or funny interactions between mom and I. when something really funny happened, or when something really scary happened, or some big decision was made. And it was a way to kind of chronicle and catalog it. And then I also started taking lots of pictures and doing lots of audio recordings with my mother. And most of those vignettes show up in the book. And most of them are very poignant and very funny. And of course, in that moment, I thought, yeah, one day, a long time from now, we're going to write this book together, you know, like we'll do it. And so this was in 2015. And that's why I wrote the book. Now, who is Barbara Ella Milton Sr.? And so what I have here is basically like a word cloud. Like these are some of the words that could describe my mother. Notable things is that she was born in Camden, New Jersey. She's one of 11 children. She was the eldest daughter. And my family was poor in growing up in Camden. And she was the eldest daughter, so her responsibility when my grandmother was out working doing days work, this is in the 1940s, then the caring of the younger siblings usually defaulted to the eldest daughter, and that was my mother. And what that meant for my mom was that she was parentified very early. In the back of the book, I have a section called Family and Friends Reflections, and where mom's siblings and some of her cousins and some of her close friends and some of the folks who were closest to caring for her, family friends, write statements about my mother. And the siblings tended to document something about their memory when my mom was sort of taking care of them when she was in that role. And what that meant also was that she missed a lot of school. There was sort of an emphasis on the boys and the younger siblings getting to school and that sort of thing. So she missed a lot of school. My mother oftentimes would describe to me various kinds of trauma that she experienced. And this is above and beyond the trauma of being poor and the trauma of growing up in a segregated city in South Jersey, and being called the N-word and all these sort of things. So that's a trauma all by itself. And that could evoke lots of feelings in someone, and certainly can scathe and scar someone. And these sort of things made my mother very angry. And so she became aggressive. I think in social work, clinical language, they'd say she probably had conduct disorder, you know, as it related to the trauma she had experienced, right? And so she frequently got into fights. She got into lots of fights in school. She was not tolerating people thinking less of her and people calling her names and this sort of thing. So she got into quite a number of fights, and the schools didn't do a good job of managing that. And I think it just turned her off, quite frankly, to being in those environments. And then she missed a lot of school as well. So I don't think my mother was a sickly child, but she, as I said, she had some of these emotional things brewing. My mother became pregnant with me when she was 14. And I'm her only child. She didn't have any other births, any other children. And she actually got penalized for having a child at 14. She was actually sent away to a juvenile correctional facility, a juvenile detention, a girls' home for girls, actually is what it was. And I think she was there for about 6 months. So my first 6 months of life was colored by the fact that she was absent. And then she had to make a way to take care of me. So what this phase of my mother's life really brought out was her tenacity and grit for survival. And she was a hard worker. She was a hard worker when she was a little kid. In fact, my cousins and my aunties and uncles would tell me stories about all of the resourceful things my mother would do to get food when she was little. One of these things included dressing up like a boy and going downtown in Camden and shining shoes and making money so she could then, you know, help to feed the family, probably got herself a little sweet treat or something as well. And the reason why that was such an incredible story to me is because that was not a job for girls. It was decidedly a boy's job, a man's job to do shoe shining. But my mother saw that it was something that you could make money at. It hints at how versatile she was in terms of what it is she could learn to do and to do well. And she actually perpetrated this scenario a few times. So until I guess she got caught at it, you know. But it speaks to her ingenuity, her grit, her resilience. And that was one of many, many kinds of hardworking things that my mom did. That was in like pre-adolescence and stuff. But then when she became an adult and she needed to make some money, she needed to begin to pay attention to the fact she had a child that was going to be reunited with her at some point, and she needed a house and she needed to have the financial means to care for this child that was clearly hers, but was not living with her at the time. So she did all kinds of jobs, factory work, lots of things with her hands, cleaning. She was a bus, later on in her life, she was a bus driver. Later on, she again worked in factory work. She was building spas. She was in electronics. And my mother always worked. And sometimes, and most times, she worked more than one job. And that's sort of a Milton Watson trait, to be a hardworking, surviving person. And she did a lot of fun things. She was athletic naturally. She was an excellent bowler. She was essentially a pro bowler. And had barriers been removed around that, she could have definitely been a pro bowler. She bowled a lot of perfect games, including games that were sanctioned by the United States Congress of the Bowling Association. And that's a hard thing to do, to bowl a 300. My average, for perspective, is about 95. She was very excellent. She played clothes, she paid attention, and this is a Milton Watson trait as well, like your appearance matters. Like you know, even though you were poor, you didn't have to look poor. And it was not acceptable to look dirty or anything like that. I mean, my grandmother, she was sharp. And this, you know, it applied to Sunday best, but it applied all the time when you stepped outside of that house. You know, you had to have a certain presentable look. My mother was, we were all raised Christian. My grandmother, Christian. We were raised in the church. My mother, lots of relationships with people, very loyal. She was an advocate for kids who had AIDS. She used to give money to the Hale House in New York. She supported kids in Africa. And of course, I didn't learn about this until I was cleaning out her effects, and I found years and years and years of canceled checks. I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't know the degree to which she made a commitment to make care. Could you please mute Galaxy Note 9? It's so good to have you here. Thank you so much. Mom was very funny. She had a very nice, funny disposition. She was also very affable. Like, she walks into a room and you would think she was the mayor. Very self-reliant. She emphasized education, even though in her heart of hearts, she felt denied and wronged about her own education, which is something she was scarred about for many, many years, even until her time of passing. Like, that's one of the biggest regrets in her life, that she basically had a second or third grade education. But it didn't stop her from having this life of rich friends, of interest, this curiosity. I mean, you know, she didn't have the formal education, but she, as I used to tell her all the time, you had a PhD in life. And she had a lot of medical issues. She was hypertensive, she had congestive heart failure, diabetes. She had Graves' disease, which is very notable, which is an endocrine disease, which actually makes one very rageful. It can cause you to be rageful. And that's important to note because my mother did have quite a lot of rage and anger with very little controls on it. So I think later in life, mom came to understand that some of that was biological. Um, uh, some of that was biological. There's a picture of my mom looking sharp. I don't know how old she was there. I'm guessing she was somewhere in her 20s, going into her 30s. I don't know. Maybe my auntie can weigh in on that. There's my mom in a very typical way, being a little goofy. You know, she'd love to make that face. Um, here's a picture of my mother much later in her life. And I think this was a Christmas present we actually gave her in the fall of 2018. And all the women in the family received this gift. And it says the Milton Watson family. It says, "You can't scare me. I was born in Camden, New Jersey." She just got the biggest kick out of that shirt. And I think, again, it speaks volumes about, like, we used to say this all the time, Mommy, Camden tough, Camden strong. So, you know, no matter what we were going through, it was a mantra that we had: Camden tough, Camden strong. Now, who am I? Only child. I was premature. I was born, I believe, in 7 months or so. In fact, I was so small. I was actually in an incubator for a couple of months, I believe. I was delayed from going home. And I was so small, I fit in the booty of one of my aunts, who was just 3 months or so older than I was. And that's how I got the family name Boot. So I fit in a booty. And the way I came by the junior is my mother actually had a name picked out for me, and the name was Sonia Denise. But at the time, she was undergoing this traumatic experience of having a birth at the age of 14. She's medicated and that sort of thing. And they were sort of rushing her about. And the nurse asked her, "We're going to name your child." And my mom tells me the story that she couldn't remember the Sonia Denise. So she just said, "Name her Barbara Ella Milton. Name her after me, but put Junior on it so I'll know, so everybody will know she's different." So I get a kick out of that story. And like I said, mom went away to a state home for girls, and then she was attending to trying to make a way and make a life. I lived with my grandmother for the first 9 years of my life, along with my aunts and uncles. And in some ways, it felt like they were my siblings, particularly the younger ones. But it wasn't until I was 9 years old that I moved in with mom. And I write a story in the book about chasing mom down one day, following her home, eloping from my grandmother's house, and following this 1967 Ford Mustang that my mother had, and following it from my grandmom's down State Street in Camden, New Jersey, and locating the car parked at number 6 Ablett Village, which is about a mile and a half away from grandmom's house. Unbeknownst to my grandmother, or my family, I had showed up at my mom's door. And when she opened that door and she saw me, and she's looking for some adult for me to be with, of course, and there was none. She yanked me into that house, and she was shocked that this little girl would make this journey. And all I said to her was, "Mommy, I want to live with you." And from that point on, basically, I moved in with my mom a few weeks later. What was it like when I first moved in with my mom? There's a lot of conflict. There was a lot of conflict. My mother, again, 14, a lot of anger issues, working really hard. We did not have that time to bond as most mothers and daughters do. And so it's no surprise that we had a relationship that was characterized by lots of conflict. And there was a lot of physical issues. My mother had a horrible temper. She would beat me. This was predating the Division of Youth and Family Services, which is now the Division of Permanency and Planning. But it predated all of that. And I say it was a lot of emotional abuse as well, because I wasn't getting my needs met. It was not warm and fuzzy. That's not what it was when I moved in with my mom. I ran away from home a few times. I do share a story with you in the book about a time I did attempt to commit suicide. I mean, it was a cry for help. I do not think I really wanted to die. At that point, I just felt like my mom loved her house and her things way more than she cared about me. And this is a little girl's eyes. This is an emotionally needy child. And I was in this volatile situation with a parent who had her own physical, emotional issues as well. We both had trauma. We both had these experiences, and neither of us had gotten any help for them. And so it was just like, I describe it in the book as two fighters in a ring about to do battle when we had encounters. And I was going to read that, but I'm just going to keep going. So that's what it felt like. It felt like we were two boxers in a ring, and we would interact and have conflict, then we'd go to our respective corners. And that's how it was for many, many years with my mom and I. So at 17, I decided to, at 15, I decided the way out of Camden and away from my mother was to focus everything on her mantra, which was education, education, education. And she sacrificed a lot so I could get educated. And I got out. I applied to colleges. I selected a college that I went to. And then I had very little interaction with my mother face to face. I felt it was dangerous. We were, in this space of separation and safety for one another. And I want to say also that my mother was a lesbian, and a lesbian in the 50s and 60s is a very different lesbian than in the 80s and the 90s on. I am also gay. And when I tell my friends, oh, my mom's also gay, they're like, oh my God, that must be so wonderful. I'm like, oh no, it's not. My mother had a really hard time accepting the fact that I was. She had a very hard time accepting the fact she was, and God forbid you be out about it. But I said, the times are different. She watched harassment. She watched friends of hers getting beat by the police. We have a context here of very conservative religiosity. Yeah, I was just going through my mom's papers today, and I came across, grandmom's obituary. And, it's so interesting to me. It's subtle stuff that makes you feel like something's wrong with you. You're not the same as your other siblings. For example, in this obituary that I just came across today, because I'm cleaning out mom's things still. And, my wife, who I was with 13 years at the time, is not listed in the obituary, but my aunties and uncles who have heterosexual partners, their names are listed in the obituary, right, as their partners. Now, look, I know people love my mother, my family loves me, but these are the subtle ways that one becomes invisible, and they get the messages of shame, and they get the message like there's something wrong, wrong with this relationship. It doesn't measure up. And, my mom had been to funerals of her brother, for example, who was a gay man, and, and gotten this subtle message that, it's not okay to be gay. She certainly got it in a lot of other ways. So I'm saying all that to say, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, it was very different to be out and about, much different than where we are today in 2021, where marriage is legal, we've advanced we've advanced acceptance and tolerance in a very different way, yeah, even in religious religious institutions. But that's part of the story that you'll hear about as well throughout the book. I became a social worker because I care about social justice and inequality and economic injustice and helping people on the margins. And I have lots of attributes that are similar to my mother's. She passed on a lot of those kinds of things to me. And I also, because of my own upbringing, I don't know anything about my father. He's never been in the picture. I have some medical issues that I wonder, like, oh, is this the gene load that I got from my biological father, who I don't know anything about? I have a heart issue. I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. I have an eating disorder. And in 2012, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And I had end-stage renal failure in 2016, where I lost the right kidney. And I'm still fighting that battle. I'm in the midst of chemotherapy, even as we are talking this evening. So I provided care to my mother while I was battling cancer. And that's why we'll talk about that self-care piece in a minute. Right now I'm retired. I'm a writer. I do a lot of stuff on social media. I continue to be an advocate and an activist, even though I'm no longer formally employed as a social worker. I was a therapist for many, many years. I focused on child and adolescent therapy and family therapy. And that takes me right back to the roots of this 15-year-old kid who was made an attempt at suicide. And holding that experience, I always said one day, I wanted to be in a position to help young people, teenagers in distress. Because at the time I did that, my mother took me to get help. And I encountered psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers at that point in my life. And they changed things for us a little bit. Like my mom stopped beating me then. And my mom also green-lighted a lot more experiences for me with school and let me to have a little bit more social life and that sort of thing. So that's who I am. And just there's my baby picture. As a little kid, my mom always looks at that picture and says, "Look at her sitting upright, eyes wide open, so alert, so curious," she would say when she saw that picture. And that's me. I think I was around 4 or 5 in this picture. I was already a little sad person then. This is me when I was 15 in high school. I was 16. Better fro back then. And this is me at a social work conference. It's fighting the fight. It's me and Kay the day that we got married, when gay rights marriage was approved in the state of New Jersey and in the nation, 2013. It's me having chemo. And at times I had chemotherapy. Yeah. So I do want to say this. Bladder cancer is not a minor cancer. It's a major cancer. The #1 symptom for it is if you have blood in the urine. The #1 cause is smoking, because I did smoke for 18 years. And at the time I was diagnosed, I hadn't smoked for 18 years. And if anybody wants to have any information about bladder cancer, you can get it at beacon.org, www.beacon.org. That's the advocacy network. That's my PSA for bladder cancer. All right. So as I said to you about our relationship, wasn't warm and fuzzy at the beginning. We had lots of major conflicts, resentments. We had a lot of good times, my mom and I, drives to the Jersey Shore, Black history, her civil rights stuff, her love of cars and games and dancing and music, and she was funny. While we had separate lives and separate corners so much, we had, I call it functional contact. but I could always count on her in a pinch and vice versa. And of course, we always came around for the times that families do normally come around, right? Funerals, weddings, birthdays, holidays, that sort of thing. It was very, very hard, our relationship. Then it got easier and easier, and it got better in direct proportion to spiritual, I don't know why that just bounced off, to spiritual fitness and a movement toward compassion and love. And that's the arc of how our relationship shifted in the caregiving journey. It was incredibly hard at the beginning. All the universal issues arise in the beginning. The struggle for power, it's a role reversing scenario. The fears, the denial, all those sort of things, and a lot more combativeness and denial in the beginning. For me, I realized pretty early on that it would be very difficult to assume care in my mother's life with clenched fists, because you got to open your fists to be able to care for someone. You got to have love. You got to have compassion. And she was sick. I had to always remember that. She was sick. Her mind was unraveling. She had every legitimate reason to be an emotional wreck, right? How I responded to her had to be different. So the book is going to tell you the ways that transformation happened. There's a picture of me and mommy together. It's just when I was in 8th grade. And you can see, not a very happy child there. This is when we were in the thick of it. And yeah, that picture makes me a little sad. But that was my 8th grade graduation, actually. Yeah, it's the days of the big afro. My mom also had battles with weight. Sometimes she was smaller, sometimes she was big like that, a lot bigger, and she was strong, as you can see. It's a strong woman right there. Beautiful, strong Black woman. That's what you're seeing in that picture there. And I was afraid. I was afraid of her a whole lot of times. All right, so let's talk about Alzheimer's now. This information comes from the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. Every 65 seconds, someone in the United States develops Alzheimer's. That's 6 million Americans today are living with it. And it's a disease that robs your memory before it robs your life. Alzheimer's begins to develop in the brain 20 or 30 years before diagnosis. My mom was diagnosed in the fall of 2015. At that time, the doctor said she's already had Alzheimer's probably for 6 or 7 years. 2/3 of those diagnosed are women. Nobody knows the reason for this. And 2/3 of Alzheimer's caregivers are also women, many of whom will have to take time off or resign from their jobs. A woman in her 60s is twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's over the course of her lifetime than breast cancer. Again, this is not a minor illness, major illness. After 60, a woman has a 1 in 5 chance of developing Alzheimer's, and by 2016, approximately 13.8 million brains will be living with Alzheimer's. Staggering prevalence of Alzheimer's dementia. Now, the Act Now Foundation, the Dementia Center at www.actnowfoundation.org, they've got wonderful information on their website about the staging of Alzheimer's. Now, my mom was considered to be in the middle stage at the time she was diagnosed, but this is going to sound familiar to you. And actually, in retrospect, I have a chapter in the book called Warning Signs. And these are where you're going to see some of these earlier stage symptoms manifesting. We didn't know they were Alzheimer's symptoms then, but here's where you know, you start to notice that they have a little more difficulty. They don't talk, you know, they don't give you as much detail when they're in front of doctors. They have difficulty finding the right words or right names, remembering new names of people who were just that second introduced to them. More difficulty performing tasks in social or work settings, forgetting material that they just read, losing or misplacing objects, very common. We went through that so often. Increased trouble with planning or organizing, right? And like I said, I'm going through my mommy's papers and stuff. It's the second time around. I do it in doses because it's emotional. You know, every time I do a talk like this, it's emotional, right? I'm reconnecting back to the loss. But anyway, I was looking at mom's papers today, and some of these papers are her financial papers and her logs and her ledgers. And up to about 2011, 10 and 11, her notes were impeccable. Color-coded ledgers, every transaction was recorded. Again, this is a woman who only went to the 3rd grade, had a lot of difficulty reading and writing. She was quite ashamed of that, but you would have never have known it. She loved technology. She was on the computer. She figured end arounds on everything. Like I said, always stayed employed. You know, you got to interview, you fill out applications. She just figured out a way, even though she harbored this great shame about not being functionally literate. I mean, she wanted more and more of that, and she didn't have that, right? So anyway, she got these copious records. Everything was in nice files, color-coded, up until about 2010. Then after that, I'd open up a folder and it says Allstate Insurance, and instead you'll find doctor's bills in there, or you'd find advertisements that she must have gotten in the mail, like some circulars, like out of place stuff. Started happening around 2010 or 2011. So those are like the early stage things that you do notice. Now, my mom had middle stage at the time she was diagnosed. This is what you notice: a lot of confusing words, much more frustration and anger, a lot of unexpected acting out. Like, yeah, she didn't want to bathe a whole lot. You know what? It wasn't because, you know, she'd say, I'm tired, I don't need it, I'm not working anymore, I don't get that dirty. I heard all those kinds of things. What it is it's almost like forgetting the mechanics of how to bathe, you know, like forgetting the usefulness of it, forgetting how to do it, right? So performing a routine task like that, cooking meals, all of a sudden much more difficult, right? Using telephones, using remote controls. This is the stuff we're starting to see at this time. Much more forgetful, especially about her own current history. The past she could talk about for hours and hours. It's the current stuff she wouldn't remember. What she did in the morning, what she did yesterday, you know, and who she did it with, you know. And if you are not with your loved one 24/7 or often, then it's very hard for you to discern these kinds of patterns, right? Like because, you know, people looking in occasionally, intermittently, you're not going to know that these are patterns that have happened. You're going to be like, you'll support your loved one's denial, right? Because my mom was in a lot of denial at this stage. Oh, everybody forgets the name of their doctor. Oh, everybody forgets how to load a CD into a CD track, you know. Oh, everybody hits their fence when they're trying to park their car. Oh, every once in a while, you're going to hit the fence, you know. So, you know, it's when you put it together in the aggregate, you get the picture. So much more forgetful, much more moody and withdrawn, especially in socially or mentally challenging situations. I mean, a lot more moodiness, a lot more emotional upset, a lot more confusion about what day it is, what time it is, how to dress appropriately for situations. I tell the story in the book about lots of struggles my mom had around getting dressed, you know, not wanting to get dressed, fights over getting dressed, And then there was this one glorious day, and it happened to be, thank you for joining us. Could you please mute? And then this mighty fine day happens where it happened to be when the, Wanda, could you please mute? There we go. Thank you so much. And it happened to be at this time where the Eagles had won the, hi Wanda, welcome. The Eagles had won the NFL Super Bowl, right? Hadn't happened in Philadelphia, right? And that particular day, when I showed up at my mother's house, it was the day of the big parade in Philadelphia. My mother was dressed to the nines in her Eagle gear. The hat was Eagle, the shirt and sweats were Eagles, the shoes were green and white, the socks were her Eagle socks. You know, it just blew me away because I had so many struggles with my mother about putting clothes on and sneakers on that had matched, you know. And then boom, this glorious day, I arrive, hoagie in hand, ready to celebrate the Eagles win. And mom was dressed to the T's in her Eagle gear. And that just goes to tell you something about, like, even though you think they've unraveled to such a large degree, there are pieces of your loved ones still there expressing who they are and what they love and care about. Like, that was still there for my mother. And it was a very moving experience. I had to write about it. Lots of confusion about what day it is, what time it is. I purchased these, what they call dementia clocks, which during the daytime, there's a white background, a big sun, and the letters are black. And then at night, the background becomes black and the letters become white. And PM is real, and there's a picture of a crescent moon to help my mother orient herself to day and time. There's a whole lot of products out there designed to help folks who have dementia and when you're caregiving. Mom did have lots of issues with her bowels and her bladder, sleep changes. The biggest things are things that this increased risk for wandering and becoming lost. Oh my God. I wrote a chapter in the book called Safety First, because mom understood that while I was not living with her providing care, I live in North Jersey, mommy lived in Camden. We put this network of support together, which the next few slides we'll talk about. And, but we had a red line in the sand, and that was safety, 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 safety. And we said at least 1 million times, if you ever were unsafe, it would be time to move you out of the home that you love so much. Her home was set up with all her comforts, her games, her everything, her cat, you know, her big 60-inch TV. It was her playpen is what it was. It had all her comforts in it. And I say to her, Mom, if you have difficulty with answering the door, being able to dial 911, cooking without burning and starting fires, or leaving the house, God forbid, those are signs to me that you're no longer safe, you no longer be in your house. So it's really important that you have those kinds of conversations and have those kinds of eyes on your loved one around the safety issues like that. Now, the severe stages, the late stages, this is when your loved one will require full-time around-the-clock assistance and with daily personal care. And this is for us when we made the decision that mom needed to go into long-term care. So if you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, eventually you will need this kind of care. There's just no two ways about it. Now, whether you can afford to do that in your own home and bring the help in, which is a very expensive proposition. And, you know, it's shameful that in this country that, you know, we have to spend, it costs so much for the healthcare like this and the care like that. It's very expensive. Nursing home care run you about $30,000 a month. right? If you're paying out of pocket. And that's less than what it would cost if you delivered a lot of those around the clock services, even in your own house sometimes. And you start to factor in all the medical pieces as well. So anyway, most people all people who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's will require full-time around-the-clock assistance, no ifs, ands, or buts. They'll lose awareness of their recent experiences. They'll lose total awareness of their surroundings. My mother perpetually would stand up and say, I got to go. And we're sitting in the living room. And I go, Mom, where are we going? I got to go home. Right. So it's just no awareness that she's in her own house. And then that was the same even when she was in the nursing home. Right. Like she perpetually wanted to leave because she just needed to go home. That was the thing she'd always say. They experience lots of changes in physical abilities, the ability to walk, sit, and eventually swallow. And I saw that entire, that decline happen. It was just, some of the lowest points, some of the saddest points. And then you have difficulty actually speaking and communicating. And then you become very vulnerable to infection and diseases. And those things all became true in my mother's case. Exactly as it's written there is exactly what happened to my mother. There's my mom the day she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, sitting in her doctor's office when we had gotten the results, right? This is before he actually told us, but that's her in the doctor's office. So these are the kinds of things that you'll read about in the book, about the issues we faced. You're going to learn about warning signs. You're going to see the reckoning that I had to go through about providing care to someone that I was not that securely and lovingly attached to at the beginning. And how the word duty really came to me. Like, I'm a Christian woman. It was not in my heart to walk away from that was clearly my responsibility. That would have been a dishonor to not only my mother, but to my grandmother and to my culture. But people do not show up for loved ones. And that's people make those choices. And these are sad times. Those are sad decisions in my view. The woman who was sharing the room with my mother at the nursing home did not have one family member who would visit with her. She had family, but she was totally just cut off from her family, and it broke my heart. So we adopted her. So when Kay and I would go there, for the holidays and such, we would always have her join us. We would give her Christmas gifts. When we bought flowers for mommy, we'd bring flowers for her, because it's sad, and there's a lot of sad situations like that when for lots of people. You're going to learn a lot about power of attorneys, the POAs. And, my mom was diagnosed on November 15th. November 16th, I had a POA in my hand. The sooner you get a power of attorney, the better, because you are going to need that to be an effective advocate and to be an effective manager of your parents' or your loved one's life. And believe you me, if you do not have that document, you are not going to be able to pay bills. You aren't going to be able to deal with banking. You're not going to be able to be part of the decision tree around healthcare. You're not going to be able to deal with assets around your home and other assets. I mean, all of those things are legal issues. Social Security. Social Security won't talk to you. Medicare won't talk to you if you don't have a POA, right? And so that's a very important thing to get as soon as possible, because you will inherit your loved one's entire life. Think about that. Every aspect of their life you inherit. It's the social, the medical, the mental health, the home, the recreational, the financial, you inherit the entire thing. So really, in our situation, I had to manage two patients' lives. I was a patient at the same time. My mother was a patient. And it really presented with a tremendous amount of stress in my life. Like, I honest to God thought I was going to die. I honest to God thought this would kill me. And some of that's not just hyperbole. Caregiving kills people. It does. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So self-care is really, really important. You will see the denial, the emotional unraveling of the mind. You're going to see in more detail these safety issues, how I managed to deal with surveilling my mother and taking care of her using technology, because there were times I was having surgery, time I was having chemo, times I was on vacation, which is really important to still take care of yourself when you can, if you can. And I had to make use of technology to help with keeping eyes on mommy. You have to deal with issues around weapons, right? Things that can be harmful to your loved one. If you knew your parents had guns and other kinds of weapons in their home, you got to get them out of the house. These are the kinds of things that you have to attend to the second you learn your loved one has a progressive, deadly, fatal disease that will take, that there's no cure for. There's no cure for. You have to look at safety with cooking, locks and handrails. You have to look at the carpeting. My mom had all these runners all over the house. We had to get all them up, right? Because slipping and falling, going to happen more often, more unsteady gaits, more unsteady walking, and safety around calling 911 and dealing with the doors, really important, right? And we had to change every lock in our house, and we had to go from a inside key lock to an inside twist lock, right? Because my mother had lost the capacity to, in an emergency, to be able to get a key, use the fine motor skills, the hand-eye coordination, and put the key in the inside lock and unlock a door and then get out of the house. It's things you have to pay attention to. How to keep them safe, how to assess if they can deal with emergencies. Can she pick up the phone and dial 911? At a certain point, she couldn't. At a certain point, she couldn't hold the phone the right way, and she would hold it backwards and upside down. And she didn't understand why this dang plastic thing wasn't working, right? It's because she forgot what it was and how to use it. You're going to hear a lot about medical issues and deal with those medications. You got to get those under lock and key. You're going to hear about the car. The car. Oh my God. You go on YouTube, you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of stories about caregivers, children wrestling car keys from their loved ones' hands. And it's essential that you do, because it's very dangerous, but understand what that car means. What that car means to your loved one. My mother said to me, I don't understand this. I've been driving, for 60 years. She said, I could drive around the corner to get McDonald's with my eyes closed. And I just said to her, no, that's what we're trying to avoid. You don't drive with your eyes closed. I mean, the car is a big, big issue. And it also, in a real way, probably for the first time, makes them reckon with the fact that now they're really dependent on someone else, right? She's now dependent on me to take her places, dependent on Uber, or dependent on, we had a family friend who actually had a cab business. So what a blessing that was, that my auntie had a friend whose family owns a taxi company. So mom had to rely on that sometimes, or getting senior transportation, right? And her embarrassment about getting on the white bus that would come pick her up to take her to adult daycare, right? So this is when it hits home for them. So the agitation went up, the anger went up, the aggression went up. She said a lot of not nice things to me during the times around her car. I understood it, because I think I'm going to be the same way when I have to give up my keys one day, You're going to hear about how you have to ask for help. Help seeking is critical. The book will explain to you all the, like I said, the layers and layers of help that we got. starting with family. You know, my aunties, my uncles, mommy's brothers and sisters, how they just like came through was so important. Even though all three of her sisters live in Texas, one lived not too far away around the corner. We had a niece that was so invaluable, Autumn, my cousin Autumn, who helped out tremendously with caring for mom in the house. Then at a certain point, we had to reckon with the decisions about in-home help, community help, nursing home care versus home care, right? And those sort of things you're going to read about. Also, you're going to hear a lot about all the losses, physical, cognitive, financial, social, and emotional losses that happen along the way. Health, thinking, the money that you know, this, I think we spent close to $50,000 of our own money. And it wasn't like on big, this was over 5 years. So, you know, if you got $50,000, you could just give up like that. It's no big deal. But when you're pinching your savings account and your retirement account, and when you don't have a lot, it's a lot more of a stressor to bear. And it wasn't even on, you know, it was on basic things. Getting the locks changed, like I said. My mom lived on Social Security, disability. I think it was like $1,700 a month. No mortgage on her house, thank God, but we did have to pay taxes. But, you know, stuff costs money. Food costs money. You know, clothing costs money. Help costs money. The help was the biggest cost. Getting the companions in the house. Medication costs money. Fixing and repairing the home. At the time we inherited her life, the roof was bad. The owner's insurance had lapsed. Her auto insurance lapsed. Her cable bill was at $500 in arrears. Just about every and anything, mostly she had lost the capacity to handle, and then hid it because of its shame and embarrassment. And it ends up costing quite a lot of money. You're also going to see that it's just a steady, constant, long goodbye. It's steady and it's progressive. And there's a lot of goodbyes. A goodbye to activities, a goodbye to your social life, a goodbye to who your family members are. I wrote a few chapters around these losses, up to and including the time my mother forgot who I was, which is one of the saddest days of my life. You're going to hear about Medicaid, the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. And Medicaid is what covers long-term care, nursing home care. You're going to read about prepaid funerals. These are legitimate expenses. If you're on Medicaid, you're permitted, if you have a home, you sell your home. We got caught up in losing her home because we were not proactive years prior. So we actually lost our house. We sold the house and the money had to go to the County Board of Social Services, minus a deduction for prepaid funerals and the moving expenses from my mom's house to the nursing home. It didn't need to be that way. As a way to prevent that. But that happened in our case. And then we had a pet, mommy's cat. So you have to deal with this cat. Is the cat getting quality care? Is the cat being neglected? What happens to the cat when mom moves out of the house? So we have an essay in there about dealing with pets who are in your loved one's home. And then as the disease progresses, you'll have to deal with hospice decisions. You have to reckon with her passing, the passing of your loved one. I have a number of essays around all of that. And you'll have the eulogy. You'll have dealing with the graves. And I wrote a chapter at the end of the book about these visitations I get in my dreams and the visits I make to my mom's grave. All right, so the caregiving issues around the POA I've talked about. You know, get information from the experts. The Act Now Foundation, I showed you their slide with information about Alzheimer's disease. And funny story about them is the day my mom was diagnosed, and we had that awful experience looking online, which prompted the query about why we should write a book, right? That night, I actually had come up to run a meeting for the National Association of Social Works. At the time, I was the chair of the chapter in our county. And we were leaving this meeting at like 10 p.m. And there was a woman as I was leaving who was coming into the building at 10 o'clock that I had never seen before in this building. She was carrying boxes and this sort of thing. And I helped her into the building. I introduced myself. She introduced herself. So she says, I'm Christine Allen, and we're renting some space up on the second floor. And we're starting a new organization in Hudson County called the Act Now Foundation. And it's a organization around Alzheimer's and dementia. Unbelievable, right? That is in fact how it happened. And for that reason, we do have a relationship with the Act Now Foundation. They offer support groups, education. They do all these brain health activities in the county. They are a repository of a lot of good information. And they endorse the book. We are also, as a charity, going to donate a percentage of every sale of every book to the Act Now Foundation to fund their dementia center. And as of this day, on the book launch in January 19th, we donated $150 to them from book sales. And on April 1st, we donated another $410 from book sales. So my mother, in my mother's name, we are going to support dementia services and this organization, the Act Now Foundation. All right. So other caregiving tips are around maintaining dignity, not overcorrecting your loved ones. Very important. You know, don't start sentences with remember I told you this, remember I told you that. They don't remember. It's torturous. It will likely evoke defenses. It will likely evoke anger, more anger, depending on the stage they're in. So, you know, be careful. Dignity is the most important thing. How do you get dignity? You listen. How do you get dignity? You let them have their say, right? Of course, you're the bottom line because they're irrational also, right? But they should be heard, and when they can make decisions. What are you going to eat today? Where do you want to go today? What do you want to wear today? Right? Like, you know, who do you want to see today? Right? What, you know, while they can say, I want this, I'll do that, let them have their dignity and let them make decisions. You know, we talked about the safety, making peace with the past, right? My mom and I had that wicked relationship. You know, it's about circumstances more than anything else. It was about unresolved circumstances. And we both had unresolved needs. It created the conflict. Well, very hard to provide care and love, very hard to provide care to someone when you got all that resentment and rage inside of you. So you have to figure out a way to make peace with the past. And for me, it meant self-help. It meant connecting to doing more spiritual work, reconnecting to my pastor, reconnecting to prayer and meditation, reconnecting to fellowships that to help me work on my own trauma, my own eating issues, and my own compulsive behaviors. Because all I was required to do was to show up with love and compassion, and to keep my eye on the ball of managing all the help, managing all the appointments, guiding my mother, letting her have the best life she can have while she was in her home, and then transferring all of that skill and knowledge and hard work to the new setting when she went into the nursing home. So staying vigilant there, building relationships there, etc. You want to make sure that your loved one eats, drinks fluids, keeps clean, takes their meds, follows all their appointments, and make sure they sleep. Sleep's really important. And eating is very important. Weight loss is pretty common with an Alzheimer's patient. It's a sign of things perhaps going south a little bit. So you want to make sure they can eat, keep them eating, keep the health with the food, with the fluids clean, and like I said, taking the medications and that sort of thing. You want to keep the structure and the normal routines also, and provide opportunities for them to socialize. It's very, very important. I had a lot of people visiting my mom. It would tire her out, but it was very essential that she got to visit people she loved and cared about. One of the highlights from my mother is when her two sisters, who are here today on this call, on this Zoom, my Aunt Yvonne and my Aunt Vanessa, when they came in from Texas, made my mother enormously happy. And I think she got a bit of a sort of a bounce back from that experience as well. She laughed a lot. She sure ate good. My aunties took care of like the house in a deeper way than I could. It was very, very important. It really lifted my mom's spirits in a big way. And then do the things, the intimate things, and the things they love to do. Hold hands, play music, sing, dance, draw, play, do all those kinds of things with your loved one, right? It's so easy to be in a knot and just focused on all that medical stuff, but you know, do these fun things too. My mother and I held hands all the time. We played music. She loved to listen to gospel music. At a certain point, you know, it all came down to hand holding and listening to music. Seek help and support. Make sure you pay attention to your other relationships too. There's lots of research, lots of anecdotes online that tell you about an adult child caring for the in-law or their parents, and then their primary relationships with their own spouses just going south, right? Not really wreaking havoc on it. The same thing with your children. So really important to pay attention to your other relationships as well, the children, your spouses. And here I just want to say, like, I don't know what I would have done if my wife, Kay, we've been together 29 years now. None of this gets done without her love and support. And I was very lucky. And she understood the prioritization of my mom's life. And then the next thing was my own, you know, certainly my own battles with my own cancer, the cancer, and made space and was so gracious around the times I said no to other events and other kinds of things. But I also said yes to a lot of things like vacations or going to the movies or just having a movie night with her in the home, you know? So you have to pay attention to those other relationships. It's also important to track and log what you're seeing. Now, you don't have to be, you know, type A about it, right? Like, but keep a general log about like what you're noticing. And why is that important? Because you are now the historian, right? Your mother, your father, your loved one, you're going to take them to the doctors, but they're not able to accurately report anymore on how they're doing or answer those doctors' questions. You have to be the one. So they're going to say, you know, what have you been seeing? What's happening with the medications? Were there falls or no falls? That sort of thing. So you become that historian. Monitor the well-being of pets. Use technology when you can. I use two-way audio, video cameras. It allowed me to see my mother in real time and to speak with her in real time, which was a godsend because I live 90 miles away, right? So I was able, while mom was still functioning okay and safe, I was able to do care, you know, 3 days, 4 days a week, simply from the camera and having the help in the house for a few hours a day And then when it shifted, you know, we had to move her out of that situation. But technology can be your friend. We had trackers on her. We had GPS responders on her wallet, on her keys, in her car. So I could in real time know where my mother was and where her things were. And that's an amazing thing. We're in an amazing time in 2021. As my mom would say, you live long enough, that shit you saw on Star Trek really does come true. She's talking about the recorders, of course, right? Which looks like a flip phone, right? So anyway, yeah. So use technology. It definitely can be helpful to you. And while your loved one is alive, have these conversations about long-term planning and what their funerary wishes are, right? There's a big issue with my mother around cremation versus burial, right? And fortunately, my mom and I had this big conversation about it, right? Now, you know, personally for me, I think paying $15,000 for a funeral is a lot of money. I don't make a lot of money. I'm a social worker. I was a social worker, right? So anyway, cremation's a lot cheaper, you know, but it doesn't matter what I want. Doesn't matter what I lean toward. It's what my mom wants. She wanted a funeral. She wanted a burial. And she said that to me every which way imaginable. She was so clear about it. And I was glad she gave me that instruction. She also told me what she wanted, who she wanted at the funeral, where she wanted the funeral, where she wanted to be buried, what she wanted to look like in the casket. You know, we had that, what she wanted at the repast, right? The meal after the funeral. She was clear about all of that. And I honored her wishes. And that brought me such peace that I honored exactly what it was she wanted. But if I didn't have the conversation, I wouldn't have known. And all too often, we don't have these conversations with our loved ones. And these are important conversations to have, right? Because that when they pass, you want to honor them. You want to celebrate their life. You know, you want to celebrate them. And you want to ask them, how can that be? What do you want there? She told me, I want to hear Amazing Grace, and it has to be by Elvis Presley. Go figure. Not Mahalia Jackson? Not Aretha? No, Elvis Presley. That was the version of Amazing Grace she loved and wanted to hear. And above all else, keep faith. Just keep the faith. Keep the faith. Work on your faith, right? Know what you have control over, what you don't have control over. You know, I dropped on my knees a lot of times and I said, dear God, help me. God, give me the strength. Lord, give me the strength, right? And just every day, give me the strength to do what parts I'm supposed to do. And I turn the rest over to you, God. My mother's life is in your hands. And understanding I can only do what I can do, you know, and having faith it would be enough. Yeah, so this is Jessica and Sandra, Miss Sandy. These were my mother's companions. Miss Sandy in particular, I want to give a shout out to because she was a godsend. She's now like one of my aunties. And my mother, this was an all the time thing, you know, laughter when Miss Sandy was around. She didn't take no stuff, but she had a wonderful rapport with my mom and really had a way of getting her to bathe. And like my mom and her built a wonderful level of trust with one another. And then she just all the time went above and beyond, right? She had such empathy for my situation. And there were plenty of times she, you know, was off the clock and still sitting in the living room with my mother, you know, and God bless her. She's an extraordinary person. And it was a wonderful organization. Although we did have one issue with that organization. You'll read about that in the book. There's my mom in that Eagles gear that I told you about a little earlier. Look at that, dressed to the nines, proud to be an Eagles fan. And this is days after I was on camera watching her get dressed and her head was in the armhole and she was sitting on the edge of the bed and unable to put her clothes on, right? This was days before this picture. And look at her being so together right there, right? It was a beautiful day. Yeah, that's her being silly. doing one of her favorite things, which is eating her dum-dums, lollipops. And let me say this to you. My mom had diabetes. We all know it. She would sit in her primary care doctor's office and she would say to the doctor who prescribes her metformin for her diabetes and say, I don't have diabetes, right? Listen, I didn't sweat the small stuff, right? I sweat the small stuff. She wanted to have her dum-dums. She had the dum-dums. It made her happy. You know, it made her happy. And, you know, you have to make those kinds of decisions as you go. Oh, there's her ode to Elvis. She's a cowgirl at heart, I think. Something she loved to do is her and Kay dancing. Right? This was in the early days as she was in the nursing home that we moved her to, and we were able to come and get her and take her out for visits. And we go over to the west bank of the Hudson River and park our cars and eat food that we brought along with us. And yeah, just one particular day we were jamming to some music. My mom loved music. And my mom's like, I got to get out of this car. We got to dance. And there she is dancing in the rotunda of the nursing home. Yeah, mom loved flowers. This is her in the nursing home. And yeah, really important to surround them with the things they love there. You know, these visual reminders, pictures of the family. We had these rainbow colored roses. They're silk roses. They were, oh, maybe they were real roses actually. But anyway, just a reminder to make them comfortable. Welcome, Anita. Could you please mute? Ah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, keep them comfortable. Keep them comfortable. Surround them by the things that you know give them pleasure, right? Give them pleasure. Really important. But I wouldn't recommend taking like a really expensive piece of artwork in like we tried to do, because there was this one picture my mom had that I thought, oh, this would look nice on this wall, you know, and literally like I think it was the same day actually, it fallen off the wall and glass everywhere. And then of course people are like, no, you never take anything too expensive in a nursing home. You just don't know this, that. So anyway, lesson learned. But we did have tons of pictures of family. And then what we would do a lot of times is I would take those photographs and I would sit with mom in the bedroom, and I would say in her room, and I'd say, oh, so this is your sister, Yvonne. This is your mother. And she'll be like, I know what my mother looks like, because she always remembered who grandma was. Or this is my brother, you know, this is my brother Leonard. Like we had pictures of all her siblings there and her close friends. So why is self-care important? Here's what the research will tell you. Caregivers get sick more than non-caregivers. Caregivers take longer to recover from illness than non-caregivers. And caregivers progress further into disease than non-caregivers. This is what the research will tell you. Now, and I'm a witness, because in 2015, when I first started caring for my mother, I had bladder cancer, yes. I had cancer only in my bladder. But then just 6 months into caring for my mom, inheriting her life, taking on that enormous stress, the cancer moved into my right kidney. Now, I can't say A causes B, but it was darn peculiar, the timing of it, right? I lost my right kidney. Fast forward to 2018, now I'm caring for my mom 3 years, right? The cancer moved into my other kidney. And even to this day today, October 2018, the cancer moved to my only kidney, my last kidney, my solo kidney. And from that time to now, I'm still fighting to keep that kidney in my body and to avert a life of dialysis and a radical surgery. And under the care of Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital. There are wonderful doctors there, cancer doctors. But I believe that had I not taken on this role, I probably had my kidney. I really do believe that. Now, you don't know for certain with cancer, but that's my belief. And when I started digging into the research and I found this out, I thought, aha, yeah, caregiving takes a toll. So what does that mean? It means you got to take care of yourself. And these are some of the things I did to take care of myself. I learned how to breathe. Hey, sounds easy, not that easy to do. You have to be intentional. We have automatic breathing. I'm talking about intentional breath. I'm talking about timing out, sitting still, just inhaling and exhaling. Now, you don't have to spend money to get on a plane to learn how to breathe. You don't have to book a hotel to learn how to breathe. This is self-care you can do any day, any hour of the day. Just breathe. And you get enormous benefit from it. Meditation, I focus on eating better myself. I have to drink a lot of water because of the bladder cancer. I drink a gallon of water a day. I have to only eat foods that are good for my kidney. So, it's a lot of nitty gritty in the weeds stuff I have to pay attention to save this one kidney in my body. But the benefits I got from it. When I focused on taking care of me, I was better able to take care of my mother. It's like that thing when you're on an airplane, right? And they say when the mask drops, when you reach the pressure in the cabin changes, and you're carrying a baby in your arms, what are you going to do when that happens? You're going to put the mask on you first, and then you put the mask on your child. You have to take care of you above all else before you can take care of your loved one. For me, I had to connect to a lot of love and positivity. That was, again, staying close to my loved ones, staying close to my friends, staying close to people who, not the negative stuff, right? The drama, I had to let all that go, cut that stuff loose, right? I also had to monitor how much news I was watching, right? News is a lot of negative things there. So I had to purposely, intentionally connect to love and positivity, right? I was getting that in support groups. I was getting that in the fellowships I belonged to. I was getting that from my Buddhist temple that I involved with, getting that from my pastor and my gay affirming Christian church that I belonged to. Connecting to that is so important. I had to learn to prioritize and then let a lot of stuff go. There's just stuff I wasn't going to get done. And that's all right. I had to abandon being perfect at getting everything done all the time and pleasing everybody. Not going to happen when you're taking care of someone with Alzheimer's. As I said, support groups, paying attention to my own medical appointments and my own wellness, and continuing to ask people for help when I needed them, when I had to have chemo, when I needed the time away, when I needed a respite, when I needed to take a trip somewhere, when I just needed time with my wife, or my friends, asking people for help. And let me tell you, the crime is if you don't ask. When you ask, most people say, yeah, I want to help you out, so we have to ask people for help. And it's also good to talk about it. I did a Facebook support groups for people who have parents with dementia. I'm in a Facebook group now for daughters who have lost their mothers, right? So, and that way I can just, when I'm feeling emotional and I need a little support and it's the wee hours of the morning, wow, I just make that post. And and a lot of times, because it's international, I'll get a reply back. That's if my left coast friends aren't available in the wee hours of the morning, where it's a little earlier out in California from me here in Jersey. Writing about it is helpful too. I did a lot of journaling and I wrote a book about it. Boy, was that helpful, right? Basically this book is a grief journal turned into a book. And I also found that if I could manage for a moment to not be so hyper-focused on me and my mom, and sometimes put my focus somewhere else and help other people, that helped me out a lot too, right? So, I write write cards to people who are sick. I make phone calls to people who are having their own personal problems, right? And for that moment, I could take that focus off of my woes and my problems and help somebody else out. And that was good for me too. I have a one day at a time approach. I again, use all my support for emotional fitness. I do a lot of things to strengthen that spiritual armor, prayer, meditation, as I said, the spiritual communities I belong to, taking time outs, taking breaks, resting, allowing myself to cry, learning how to roll with things and just laugh sometimes, enjoying the company of my spouse, my children, our children, and family and friends. And when I got a chance to have a respite because my aunties were in town or because my cousin had my mom for the weekend, she was caring for mom, or mom was in the nursing home and she was doing A-OK. Do what you love. Do what you love when you have a respite. So I golfed, I played video games, I go to the theater, that sort of thing. At a certain point, I came to just accept that this is the way our life is. More acceptance, not, oh, I wish it were this, oh, why this? So, just accepting that this is how it is for today. Like my mother, she's still with me, she's here. This is her capacity for today, accepting it and not being on a head trip about it all. And really seeking to have as much peace as I could about the situation we were in. Yeah, so this is Kay, me and my mom. It's me golfing. It's so beautiful at this particular golf course in Jersey City. It's the Hudson County golf course on Duncan Avenue. This is, we take vacations to Puerto Rico. Eating well is really, really important. There's a meal that I prepared. It's very important to pay attention to diet. It's my bicycle, so I like to ride my bike, get away when I can. So, taking care of yourself is doing the things that you love, right? So this is January 2019. I'd gone on vacation. Mom was in the nursing home now for 6 months, coming into her 7th month. Things were pretty settled, I'd say would be the best word. We had good relationships with all the staff at the nursing home. We had a schedule of visits. Mom was, she was definitely in this entering into the last stages. I mean, like she was already not walking so well. She was already a lot more withdrawn. I tell you lots of stories about how that plays out in the book, what I observed, and I recorded it. So this was, I was in Puerto Rico. I sent her this 5-foot teddy bear because she called me up and she said, that she was sort of lonely, And I say this a little later, but look, if you're gay before Alzheimer's, you're going to be gay with Alzheimer's and after Alzheimer's. Okay. So it's so funny. I tell a few anecdotes in the book about, I told everybody about my mother's sexual orientation. I think it's very important that they understood that about her. This was very important in the adult daycare that she went to. Excuse me. It was also very important so that if they heard her say something like, I want to marry her, they would understand that, who she is. And this nursing home she was in, they were just lovely people. And, but my mom used to tell me, I'm really ready to have somebody that I sleep with at night. So I sent her this bear from Puerto Rico. But anyway, I told her while I was away, I was going to begin to think about this book that we were going to write. Like now was the time to do it. She had been in the nursing home for 7 months and 6.5 months, and we had the routine down, and it was like, okay, now we can get to writing the book. And when I say we would write the book, it's more like I would be in her presence and we would write the book. And because at this time, a lot of her, it wasn't a lot of like connecting around the conversations, right? She was already on the decline. But I felt good about the plan to be coming there with my laptop and my pad and paper and to begin writing this book in her presence. January 17th, I returned from Puerto Rico after being gone for 2 weeks, and I presented her a faux book, a fake book, that on the cover, it said, Heeding the Caregiver Call, Our Alzheimer's Story, Barbara Milton, Jr. and Sr. Essays about issues we face, feelings we felt, knowledge we gained on our role reversing journey. That's what came to me in Puerto Rico. And my mom's holding this book. You know, I asked her what did she think? She says, I like it. This is good. Right. That was January 17th. January 18th, I came to the nursing home. And the staff said, oh, we're so good, happy that you're here. We're having a lot of difficulty getting your mom to eat today. And I said, oh, really? They're like, yeah. And we're having difficulty. So I go in there. My mom didn't open her eyes up at all. She would nod to acknowledge I was there. I held her hand. And I said, you know, you got to eat. Let me feed you. So she would open her mouth when I would put food on the spoon to her mouth. That was on the 18th of January. By the 22nd of January, my mother had taken a turn for the worst. We were told that she was very close to passing now. We were told that we needed to make some decisions because she had a pacemaker defibrillator in her chest, and that we had to deactivate the defibrillator. And so we had to make some decisions around that. And on January 31st, my mother died, which was startling, right? The whole time I was in Puerto Rico, we were there. I'm talking to her twice a day. You know, she's articulating that she's lonely, or that she's not lonely, but she wanted someone to sleep with. You know, she was eating, but probably less so. Like I said, I showed her the book on the 17th. The 18th, she closed her eyes and never opened them again. And we lost her on the 31st. So I know how much this book meant to my mother. And I am delighted to share this book with others. One of the people that reviewed the book said, I expected this book to provide information on Alzheimer's dementia and to be a practical guide on caregiving. But what I didn't expect was a love story. And that really is what our journey became. It became a bit of a love story. It was rough at first. We moved through it. I said that redemptive power of love, and learned a lot of lessons around self-care. Learned a whole lot about all kinds of systems. I'm very critical about some of these systems in the book. So I think we accomplished what Mom wanted, because I promised her on her deathbed I would write it. And we have. I have. So this is the aftermath. I love this sculpture, Melancholy, by the artist Albert Gorgi. He's a Swiss artist, sculptor. This typifies grief, the hollowing out of oneself. That's how I feel. That's how I felt. And that's how I still feel so often. And lots of ways to cope with grief, right? I think writing her stories helped me to cope. I hired a coach to help me, Elizabeth Hill, allowing myself to cry and feel feelings, to try to stay positive, to try to stay focused on healthy ways to soothe myself, not overeating, not doing things that would be damaging, seeking more support, formal and informal. Letting go of guilt, like, did I make the right decision? Oh God, that tortured me for a while. But having some grace and mercy around that. Connecting to higher power and spiritual support. Visiting her grave, knowing that that's where her body rests, but I know her spirit is elsewhere. Staying and making a commitment to stay connected to my family, to my aunties. They've been with me on this journey with all these book talks, and it's the biggest blessing, and it's the kind of love I need. Creating rituals, like planting flowers at her grave and that sort of thing. Rest, diet, exercise, and gratitude. These are some of the things I've used to help cope with loss and with the grief. And as I said, each time I tell this story, there's a part of me that reconnects to the grief. And I have to be determined to continue to use these coping strategies. So here are the takeaways from the book. You can hate Alzheimer's, but you got to love the person. And if you're gay before, you're going to be gay after. Just pay attention to that aspect. And communicate that so that people know the totality of who your loved one is. I told my mother, I know you lived with a lot of shame being gay in your life, but there isn't one part of what I'm going to do for you that is going to foster and perpetuate that shame. I'm not going to do it in your eulogy. I'm not going to do it in the funeral. I'm not going to do it in the nursing home. I'm not going to do it. That you are a whole, beautiful person. God created you just the way you are. God loves you for just who you are. And let me tell you something, of all the things my mother wondered about, this was the burning question for her. Does God love me, even though I'm gay? And there's a story I tell about that in the book. But that was her big question. This is why she didn't want to be cremated. This is why she wanted to look her Sunday best. Because she said, when I meet God in heaven, I've got a question to ask God. And I said, Mommy, what's that question? I'm going to ask God if God loved me, even though I was gay. Breaks my heart to say it. And I did all I could to affirm that I loved her. And we all loved her, even and especially because she was daring to be gay. Now, if there's a trauma or mental illness before Alzheimer's, it's going to be there with Alzheimer's. All that abuse, all that trauma my mom went through. When she had a psychiatric evaluation at the nursing home, I had tried for years to get her support. She wasn't having it. She just bucks the cultural norm. Wasn't going to happen. Even though her daughter's an accomplished psychotherapist, okay? She just didn't trust it, okay? But that's, I'm tell you something, in those last months of her life, when she was put on an anti-anxiety medication, my God, did my mom's temperament change. She laughed so much more. She was so less distressed. And all I kept saying was, my God, if that could have just happened to her in her 30s or her 40s or her 50s or her 60s, how she could have been spared so much anguish around her coping around the trauma. Be an advocate. You are now the historian of their lives, and you got to stand up for them. I have lots of stories in the book about all the places that I needed to advocate with doctors, with Social Security, with welfare, with the nursing home, with the Division of Motor Vehicles. There's a lot of stories around the need to be an advocate. What does that mean? Speaking up. Standing up on behalf of the person you love. It'll be difficult. It can be abusive. Safety is always the most important thing for your loved one and for you. Put safety first. Put the supports in place you need to help keep you and your loved one safe. It's another takeaway. Downsize. Plan for your own old age, older years. Think about the burden you leave behind for your children. Discuss your wishes with your children, at the time that you need to, right? Have these conversations with your adult children. Feel your feelings, it's okay. Take care of you, all of you, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Get help, find the experts, increase the amount of support you have in your life. That's how you can get through the most difficult challenge of your life. Don't have regrets. Do the things you promised you would do while your loved one has the capacity to participate and enjoy them. My mom always wanted to go to the US Open tennis tournaments. We never went. God, I felt horrible about that when she passed away. You start to think about all those conversations, the what if I had done this, what if we had gone there, all the experiences you want to have with your mother or your father or your auntie or whoever you're charged with caring with. Don't have regrets. Do it while they're able. Do it while you're able. That's a takeaway from this book. And tell your story. It can bless someone else who's on this journey. You might just be starting the journey that you've already traveled down the path on. Tell your story. Doesn't have to be a book, but let folks know. So here's what the book is. It's 358 pages, 100,000 words, 33 photos, got 6 parts, 74 essays in it. And the principal characters in the book are my mom, me, my wife, Kay, and her cat, Pepper. There are resources in the book, at the back of the book, for Alzheimer's, for self-care, for caregivers. It is designed to be read cover to cover, or just pick and choose the topic, the essay, the chapter of your choosing, right? I mean, what caregiver has time to sit down and hold a book and read it cover to cover, right? So pick up the chapter you want to read about. You want to learn about a POA, read that chapter. You want to learn about how the mind unravels, read that chapter. You want to learn about Medicare versus Medicaid, pick that chapter, right? Sometimes the story is being told in the voice of Barbara Jr., the daughter, and other times it's Barbara Jr., the social worker. Can't help myself. Those are the 2 ways that I kind of flip back and forth in this book. Now, my mom passed before COVID. I completed the book during COVID, and arguably, hands down, people are providing care now. It's probably a lot harder. People in nursing homes and getting visits are, as you know, a lot harder. Hopefully, we're going to turn the corner here and things are already starting to look a little better. But, please just double up on these are frustrating things, frustrating times, harder times, more difficulty with mental wellness during this time. Redouble your efforts on self-care. Redouble your efforts on self-care. Very, very important. And redouble the efforts on trying to keep your loved ones safe. Doesn't mean you can't call into the nursing home, still participate in those team meetings, still talk to the charge nurses on duty to check in, and when the world opens up again, get back in there because, the holding hands, the being with, the time in the day room, the being there for the watching TV and listening to music, or those church sessions, the church events that they had in there in the nursing home. Those are wonderful, wonderful times to participate in, the holiday events and that sort of thing. And a lot of people are being denied that right now. It just sort of breaks my heart. But hopefully better days are coming. What you won't find in the book is I never vilify my mom, right? I understand my mom's anger. I understood where it was coming from. I blame the way the world is organized with racism and poverty and the have and the have-nots and the inadequacies on healthcare and all these other things. Well, no vilification of my mom. No vilification of any worker in any system we engaged in. I do critique them, but these are by and large very hardworking people simply trying to make a living. That's true for the nursing homes, it's true for welfare workers, it's true for people on the front lines providing care for this population. Yeah, there's a couple of rogue people I had a couple experiences with where I felt like they were not that properly attentive to my mom in the nursing home, but I just stayed on the case. I communicated my concerns upwards to the supervisors. I participated, I showed up, and we made sure mom was okay there. There are no conspiracy theories in this book, and there's no mythology about nursing homes. I mean, I took Mom to visit nursing homes because when she heard the word nursing home, you might as well said we were going to the Tower of London in England, where they do torture on people, okay? And I'm just like, no, let me show you a nursing home, Mommy, when she was able to understand what it was. So we went to visit nursing homes. She got to look at the rooms. She got to meet the staff. She got to see the grounds and the environment and the bed and the room and the bathroom. She got to see it. And she says, oh, that's a nice place. That's the place I want to go to if I ever have to go to a nursing home, right? Problem solved, no drama. There are these extra chapters, a prologue and an epilogue. There's the experience of my first life without my mother in it. And I just go through every time, not every time I thought of her, but certainly around the memorable markers like holidays and Super Bowl and football season and tennis season and baseball and basketball season and the holidays and such and the anniversaries. So I wrote about my experiences of all that. And there's that family and friends reflections. And then the last chapter of the book is the gratitude section. And this is the orchestra of persons, family members, friends, services, agencies, doctors, lawyers, realtors, every kind of person that we had to call on from the beginning until the end, the funeral parlor, etc. And my gratitude to them, because it took a village, it wasn't just me. And if I didn't have that kind of support in my life, I don't even know how I would have got through it. So I do an honor to them. Now, if anything that I've shared with you speaks to you, if you want to know more about the self-care, the journey, me and my mommy, those resources, etc., you can order the book directly from me. The book is $20 plus $5 for shipping and handling. If you yourself are a caregiver or a person who's on a fixed income or low income, I will give you the book for $10. That's not a problem for me. I understand what it means to be on a fixed income. And you can purchase that book at my website, www.drbarbaraemiltonjrlcsw.com. Now, all you have to do is navigate to the store page. From that home page, you can pay with PayPal, credit card, or debit card. And if there are other ways you can pay there as well. And again, a portion of each sale will help fund the Act Now Foundation Dementia Center and further the work that they're doing on behalf of families with loved ones who have Alzheimer's. And if you want to connect to me beyond today, I have a YouTube channel. You can catch me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I also have a podcast called Listen Up with Dr. Barbara Jr. And that's on all the major podcast stations, Apple, Spotify, Google Casts, etc. All right, so now I'll open this up for any questions and also any comments or anything folks would like to share. Any questions? Anyone?
Hi.
Hi, Pamela.
Hi. I was just curious about how did your mother, did she ever change her mind about your relationship with your
Oh, yeah, we made peace.
Oh,
We made
okay.
peace, my mom and I. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Okay.
Yeah, she came, and then the way to play that was this. She had a friend who said at the beginning, you can't trust your daughter with this POA thing and all that, because all she's trying to do is take your money, your car, and your house. And my mother believed that. That's where our relationship was.
Okay.
And then after many, many months of years, maybe 2 years, a year and a half in, of the constant care, the constant showing up. This is the first time my mom and I really connected day in and day out like this.
Mhm,
As I said, before that we weren't.
mhm.
And one day my mom says to me, I knew I could count on you. She was wrong. And
Wow.
that's when the door opened. And that's when we knew that we could make peace with the way it was and let it go.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was a miracle. It really was.
Also, I wanted to ask you, you said daughters who have lost their mothers, that's a support group?
Yeah, on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Yep. There's tons of support on Facebook, but also these Alzheimer organizations all have support groups. Whether it's are you in New Jersey? You're in Jersey City, right?
I'm not, well, no, I'm not in Jersey City, but I'm in Jersey. In
Yeah.
Union.
So there's the Alzheimer's New Jersey organization. There's the
Mhm.
Act Now organization. They have support groups.
Okay.
There's the New York City Care and Kind Coalition. They have groups. So you're not going to be at loss for getting support groups.
Okay.
Yeah, and everybody's on Zoom right now, of course, through the
Right.
pandemic. Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you.
you're more than welcome. All right. Auntie, did you want to say anything? We're going to wrap up. There's no other questions. You can unmute.
One more.
Oh, go ahead, Pamela.
Hi. I was wondering, is it when they're in, like you were saying, in the home, you make it as comfortable as possible. When how did you handle traveling or taking them out of their environment, taking your mom from her environment? How was that? Was it difficult?
Well, it wasn't difficult when she was mobile,
Okay.
right? So the whole time my mom was in her house, she was either walking fine or she had a cane a lot of times. Toward
Mhm.
like at 2016, 2017, she was on a cane. And it wasn't until I'd say January, it wasn't until like October of 2018 that she was in a wheelchair. So I had a lot of years with my mother where she was mobile, and then we could take her out and do stuff, just strap her in with the seatbelts and we were good to go, and she liked to go to Walmart. She liked to go to, she liked to go to the store. She liked to, go to restaurants and eat, we did a lot, all that. So she was very mobile for a long time.
Okay. But there was
Until the disease progressed.
Right. Okay. So there was no apprehension. Was there any apprehension for her once it did progress and you had to transfer her to the
Sure. Now you had toileting issues to deal with. You had, she was a little more paranoid, a little more fearful, a little less trusting, a little more argumentative, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So at a certain point, like these are cues that it's overwhelming for her.
Right.
Like, this is her best way. Like, again, she's sick. These are her best ways of trying to communicate her distress while her mind is being gobbled up by Alzheimer's plaque, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
she's doing the best she could. And you have to take those as signs that she's in distress.
Right.
And that's why I think in the end, she closed her eyes a lot, because I think just having her eyes open and getting all that sensory stimulation stressed her out. It was so much easier to just be in the space with her eyes closed.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, Pamela. No? All right, so I only wanted to go to 9 o'clock. I think we're a little over now. Lee, did you want to say anything? Oh, Anita, did you want to say anything? Feel free to unmute.
I typed it in the chat. I have a baby with me. I typed it in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope,
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. Thank you so much. Thank you. Lee? Oh, Yan, did you want to say something?
No,
Barbara, can you hear me?
no,
Yeah,
I
hold
don't
on,
really
Lee.
see anything.
All right. Thank you, Auntie.
Coming up.
Okay,
Okay.
Lee?
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for, can you hear me?
I can now. We can hear you. Now we lost you.
Barbara, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Barbara. Okay. No, I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story, and I appreciate you. It must be my internet connection.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing your story, and I hope everyone has a nice evening.
Thank you so much. Again, my thanks to the Secaucus Library. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Auntie and Pamela, for
Now
joining
you're
us.
muted.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
You're
too.
welcome. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
God
night.
bless. Stay safe.
Thank
All
you.
right, you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And you know, I hit that 7-4 yesterday.
Oh, why did I should have said something. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
great
Take
night.
care.
All right, Auntie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.